Howdy, partners. Time to saddle up, because today we're talking Westerns. I'm not going to talk like that the whole time, nor wear the hat the whole time. And I'm going to have trouble talking the whole time because I'm getting over a sore throat. And we'll see if I can get through this even. So, today is a special occasion because we're going to be talking about Westerns. And the first time we're going to be talking about two titles. And first, we're going to be taking a look back at Chesler, which tried to introduce another new title simultaneously with Star Comics, and that was Star Ranger. There have been Western heroes in almost every anthology book up to this point, but this would be the first title that would specialize in the Western genre. Now, this is a Chesler title, so if you've already watched episode 28, you know I'm not about to rave about how good this was. I do want to tell you which features at least weren't bad. It was intended to be a companion title to Star Comics, both published in the same oversized format, both largely featuring work from the same creators, like Craig Flessel and Fred Gardenier, who I introduced to you in that episode. Even though Star Comics is supposed to be the humor-themed book, Star Rangers features an awful lot of jokey fare, like Tenderfoot Joe. There are few recurring features in Star Ranger, mostly just random cowboys, and the stories are short, 1 to 3 pages and very rarely 4. The first one I liked was Lee Trent. As you can see, this wasn't a comic strip in the traditional sense, but an illustrated story, like what Chesler was trying out in Star Comics as well. As I've mentioned before on this channel, every comic book contained a text story back then because there was a loophole in the law that allowed anything containing a text story to go out for a cheaper postal rate. I will confess that most of the time I skip over text stories, but I do like this format of a lavishly illustrated story, but one where the panel art isn't the main source of telling the story. You'll note that the bad guys in this first Lee Trent story are called the Ghost Riders. I find that particularly amusing because of the rich history of Ghost Riders through comic book history, and maybe we'll talk about more of them someday. Maybe you even saw the Nicolas Cage movie. Yeah, these are not those Ghost Riders, but it does seem like every generation the name pops up again. It's fun. Since I'm also not a big fan of the Western genre, naturally my first pick would be the one that pushed the boundaries for the Western genre. One of the tropes of the Western is that it overtly takes place in the Old West, or modern technology is kept out of the story enough that it could be in the Old West, or maybe it's in modern times, but it's really hard to say. But Lee Trent is clearly in modern times. When he stops a bank robbery, the robbers aren't using 6 guns, they're using Tommy guns. Lee Trent uses what the story calls a rocket pistol, but what it means is that he's using a flare gun. And it's not that I'm fond of guns at all in my comic book stories. I'm actually really sick of stories being resolved with gun violence. But doing this raises the danger level and makes the story a little bit more exciting than the average Western is for me, where it's always the same guns. But this is just the earliest example. Quite a few Star Ranger stories take place in obviously modern times, leading to some unusual scenes like a cowboy getting around by car until it gets a flat tire, or trying to stop a plane with a lasso. Take a short break so I can get something else to drink because my sore throat is killing me. Okay, I'm back. I got a throat lozenge in my mouth. And by the way, I'm also aware this is not actually a cowboy hat. It's the closest thing I have to one. So, yeah. Where'd I leave off? Oh, right. Just like Star Comics, Star Ranger continues after issue number 6 as an Ultem title. When Ultem purchases it from Chesler, the content remains largely identical. Only some features are longer, up to what is Ultem's norm of 7 pages. By the end of 1937, Lee Trent is still just a semi-regular character, but he's up to 5 pages when he does appear. Ace and Deuce and Tubby of T-Bone Ranch are 2 more commonly occurring features. And that's really all I have to say about Star Ranger. But I'm not done talking Westerns yet, because at the same time as Chesler came out with the first issue of Star Ranger, Comics Magazine came out with Western picture stories. It may look odd to us that there were 2 Western titles, because we know spoilers about how Chesler's titles and Comics Magazine's titles both wind up as Ultem titles. But while we might see them from our perspective as companion titles, at the time they're actually competing titles from different companies. In fact, they were competing against each other in more ways than they may have known, because when Ultem acquires them both, Ultem decides that one of them is getting cut, and that one that gets cut is Western Picture Stories, just 4 issues old, and it's gone. Which is perplexing to me, because Comics Magazine had the better Western title in my opinion. The story lengths were already 7 pages, the standard Ultem would bring Star Ranger up to. These were these were serious Western stories without comic filler. It has no recurring characters, but just series of standalone cowboy heroes. Granted, most of them weren't good, but you're only reading these thick anthology books for the gems, right? And the first and third issues have no gems at all, but the second issue sports The Law of Caribou County, a Wild Tex Martin story, indeed the only Wild Tex Martin story, but one created by Will Eisner and tied for his earliest artwork in an American comic book. And the fourth and final issue has a fun and comedic, without being too jokey or silly, Western story called Caveman Cowboy, about a sheriff who just doesn't like girls for some reason. And it's by Joe Baresh, who I've talked about in several episodes already. And you know I like his cartoony artwork. Okay, so the total number of stories I would recommend from both titles wouldn't fill a single issue of either, but that's me and Westerns. And that's all I've got to say for this episode. I'm going to leave before my throat goes out, and bye for now.